Okay, it's now 7:03. We're going to call the regular meeting of council to order. It's October 26th and 7:03 p.m. Just start this meeting as we do all of our meetings with the acknowledgement that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, and that their connections to these lands continue to this day. I also want to just remind everybody that we are live streaming, but if you're watching, this is also available for viewing later through the municipal website. The first item on the agenda is a series of council and committee meetings minutes. Item number 1. Are there any changes or corrections? I'm not seeing any, so I just need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Then we have the advisory body minutes of the Public Art Advisory Committee of March 10th. This is a motion to approve. Oddly enough, under our current procedures bylaw, not to receive. So I need a motion
to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. That is correct, is it not, Ms. Morden? Okay. Any correction, changes, anything? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much for that. Mayor's remarks. Give me a second here. I forgot to pull out my notes, so let me grab those. I should probably be able to just remember everything that ever happens in our community, but I can't, so here we go. I guess first off, just want to congratulate unofficially, because the counts aren't in, but we have a new MLA no matter what. It looks like it's Marie Rankin, so congratulations to him, and on a really well-run election, I have to say, by Elections BC. I also want to just let you know, today was, we were intending to have the City of Victoria come and present the Richardson Street, but they had to postpone, so we're not going to be having that here tonight, but we are working to reschedule that in the near future. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the arborist that died doing work in Oak Bay this week, and the huge outpouring of support from the community, and I think it really impacted a large number of people. So just our thoughts are with the family and friends and coworkers. Also, just want to remind people that leaf pickup is underway currently in our municipality. So please look at the schedule of what part, where the leaves are being picked up at what time, and put your leaves out. Again, a reminder to put the leaves on the boulevard, not on the road. I want to keep the roads clear for bikes and cars. Also, just of course, today was the first of 3 days that the Public Works Yard is closed. They're doing some significant upgrades in there to the compactors and other equipment, so avoid that for the next 3 days. And last but not least, not quite last, again, reminder, there's no trick-or-treat on the avenue this year for Halloween, so but there are some lovely decorations, so thank you for the BIA and our Public Works for helping decorate the avenue. And last but not least, we have the Remembrance Day Ceremony is going to be virtual. People are welcome to live stream that. There will be a small contingent of people to run the ceremony the day of, but the expectation is that people are not attending in person. So just another reminder to people not to show up at the cenotaph on the 11th, but please do attend our ceremony through the computer. That ends my comments. Up next, we have the public participation period. Again, in this virtual time, we have a call-in process of 250-598-3311. The public is welcome to call in and address council on any item of interest to Oak Bay. And I believe there's at least one scheduled caller today, if I'm not mistaken. Ms. Morden?
Yes, you're correct, Your Worship. I'm just waiting for the caller to be put through.
And there's nobody who's registered in person today? Okay.
Caller's on the line, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. For the caller on the line, just please identify yourself by your name and your municipality of residence. And then we will start. Every speaker has up to 3 minutes to address council, and we have a total of 20 minutes for the segment overall. Go ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. It's Marion Cumming at 151 Sunny Lane. Grateful to be a guest on Lekwungen territory.
Welcome, Ms. Cumming.
And like others, in Oak Bay. I appreciate the great effort that you and many others have devoted to the proposal to appropriately locate a wolf sculpture honoring, oh my, it's difficult to pronounce, Shitkaya the wolf. I agree with Maeve Leiden that more time ought to be allowed to finalize the decision. She recommended Willows Beach as a possible alternative location, given the ecologically sensitive land there at Cattle Point. And others have suggested Turkey Head or Queen's Park, amongst others. Yet there is little attention being paid to First Nations concerns, especially Songhees' sensibilities relating to their deeply felt affinity for wolves, symbolic of family, running in packs and caring for one another. It is regrettable Indigenous artists rooted in the land and wolf culture were not consulted. Songhees' knowledge keeper, Florence Dick, was belatedly approached and could still be called upon to offer invaluable advice. Long-standing Indigenous names for Cattle Point and Uplands Park and Discovery Island could be acknowledged. And given the current treaty talks with Songhees and the government in relation to the Cadbury Bay and surrounding area, it would be wonderful, I think, if the community could acknowledge that the time has come to consider returning Discovery Island to Songhees. It's considered by them to be one island at low tide with their Chatham Island. So your appreciation of what ought to be taking more time to make a thoroughly wise and more inclusive decision would be very much in order, I think. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cumming. Your timing is impeccable. Are there any other callers queued up to speak to council this evening?
No, Your Worship, but I will just double check with the front reception.
Sure. We're happy to wait for a minute here if anybody else wishes to call in. Again, 250-598-3311. I always get lost because it sounds like we're doing a dial-in.
No calls, Your Worship.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And an appropriate segue here from Ms. Cumming to item number 5 on the agenda, which is regarding the anonymous donation of public art. And we've had a substantial, if anybody's looking at the agenda package, a pretty substantial number of write-in email letters and emails to the council on this. And I think I'll just take a moment to just acknowledge those about 25 or so residents, some multiple times written in over the last week. I know many of them were reacting to an email that was circulated about the potential of the art damaging the rare and endangered ecosystem at Cattle Point. I really do appreciate, I think all, I'm not sure, I didn't read them that carefully, but pretty much all were complimentary of the art itself, and certainly suggested that they like the art, but were suggesting consideration of other sites in Oak Bay. And I thought I would take a moment just to articulate to those at home what it is that's gone on to date and what's in front of council tonight. And then just a reminder that we haven't actually had an offer of a donation yet. We're sort of doing this a little bit backwards in the sense that we're considering if we're willing to offer a site in Oak Bay, and then we'll make the ask of a donation if that works out. I also I just appreciate Ms. Cumming raising the question of the story keepers. I should update people here at the council table as well. There's been a lot of discussions over the last I guess, week, but in particular over the weekend and into today with the artist and the Songhees Nation coming to agreement in terms of how that story will be told. They've spoken to the storykeeper. They have that buy-in through that process. In fact, the artist has even been attended on the island at their invitation to go and get the stories directly of that island and their stories attached. I've also spoken with Chief Sam and with Ms. Dick on this and have agreement from them in terms of the siting and the process underway. So original process given to us still intact, but a better process in terms of the actual artists themselves, and that's where that conversation is sitting. There's a couple of suggested, if and only if council decides that this is still an appropriate place to move forward, there's a recommendation for a couple of additional lines that are on your desk as well that would address the conversations that I've had with the Songhees. I think I would just want to point out one of the great joys of having such a diverse and thoughtful council is that we tend to anticipate the concerns and questions of the public even before they ask them. And so when this first came to us, there was the points raised in these emails. It's interesting how aligned they are in terms of looking at alternate locations for the art, looking at ways of mitigating the rare impacts on the rare and endangered species at the cattle point, making sure that we're undertaking consultation with First Nations and allowing for some sort of public input process into the art. Obviously, the public input process is underway to the artist. The First Nations protocols have been established, and most importantly, between the artist and the Songhees, and the alternate locations have been looked into in detail. And I think it's worth pointing out why we're not sort of here talking about multiple sites tonight. It is because we made that request a long time ago, and those sites were looked at, and for any number of reasons, not least of which is just the seismic constraints and the desire for a natural siting of such a piece of art. There's also the limitations of where crane could put the art, which limited how far away from a road we could put it. But at the end of the day, we're down here with just one option being considered here today, and that would go forward to the donors for a request, if it goes forward at all. I just want to just address specifically the concerns raised, and they're totally legitimate about both by council and by the public about the ecological concerns there. And the process that we've undertaken for those at home is that the artist met with and myself and a couple of others met with the manager of parks, who has been a longstanding advocate for the protection of that park, the expert botanist who's been in charge of developing our cattle point management plan, who is the expert on the rare and endangered species and has been tasked with sort of managing that protection process, and one of the founders of Friends of Uplands Park, who's had almost 30 years of maintenance in that park, just to get from them what they thought, if anything, was possible there that would allow for siting. And the end result of that is where the recommendation is in front of us today. That's locating the art directly adjacent to the parking lot in the area that's currently fenced off. It currently contains mostly bushes and a bit of grasses, mostly invasive species that were put there about a decade ago to stop the spread of carpet burrweed. It's not to protect any endangered species in that land. And there's a couple of points that the people who attended that site wanted. One was to keep any points of interest as far away from the vernal pools as possible. So this creates a point of interest as close as possible. It creates significant ecological restoration in that particular area. It opens up sight lines from that area as well, so people can see the ocean from closer inshore. It expands the safe space for walking, i.e. away from the endangered species, and of course has the natural exposed rock, which is in keeping with that piece of art. So it doesn't mean that that's just everybody's concerns, for sure, but I just wanted to make sure people at home had a chance to understand the process that had been undertaken over the last few months as we first got wind of a potential donation and the steps that have gone through to this point to get it here. And I think the work done to address the cultural issues, the First Nations protocols, the artistic issues, the siting, the limitations has sort of brought us to this point. And at the end of the day, it's up to this body as to whether or not we feel is to be met, if there's additional work required, or if it's just not suitable, and then at which point that would end the question, because we would not then ask for the donation, obviously. Sorry for that rambling. People at this table understand that history, for sure. I just felt, given the quantity of emails, I'm sure people would like to have some understanding of why we are here. and how we got to this point. So I will stop talking now. We have the report in front of us and a recommendation from our committee of the whole to this body, but certainly at this point we can take questions or a motion or comments. I'm happy to take comments before a motion if desired. No, go ahead. Councillor
I
Braithwaite.
could make the motion if you like, and then comments after if you like.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Motions are always in order.
I'll move that the proposed siting of the art piece Takaya at Cattle Point be approved, and that the siting details be shared with the Songhees First Nation leadership in acknowledgement of their traditional connection to the lands, and that the Songhees be invited to join the district in a ceremony for the site as and how they determine is appropriate, and further that it be recommended to council that the mayor be directed to make every effort to secure the donation of the art for the district of Oak Bay.
Second.
We have a motion, so questions or comments are welcome at this point. Councillor Green.
I'll just make a brief comment. I really appreciate your explanation. I think that really helps to inform the public. Oftentimes, unfortunately, there are misunderstandings when information isn't fully complete or people have different understandings of what went on. But I think in this case, I'm sufficiently, well, even more than sufficiently, I'm impressed with the level of detail and the level of consultation that has occurred, particularly since our last meeting. So I would like to thank you, Mayor Murdoch, for your work and involvement in helping advance this project. And that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and possibly a question for you, just being privy to the discussions with the Songhees First Nation. So I guess implicit in the recommendations and what's being put forward here is that the Songhees have agree with this potential siting. What was the nature of the conversation as to whether or not other sightings would also be acceptable to the Songhees? Were other options presented to them?
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. So in general terms, the initial consultation went over the potential sightings as abroad. The only sighting that was cited as a potential problem was willows, just because of the cultural history of that area. But the other sites that were contemplated, Turkey Head, Queen's Park, Cattle Point, all deemed to be acceptable to the Songhees. And the willows was not excluded; it was just raised as a flag that we would probably need to do a bit more work on that front. And like the later conversations, as of today, was just for confirmation, was obviously just about the one sighting at this point. Councillor Ney.
Yeah, I'm going to support the motion that's before us. I feel that we have ticked off all the boxes here. I am satisfied that this is not negatively impacting the rare ecosystem in the park. I've gone through the Uplands and Cattle Point Management Plan, and I feel confident that we're compliant with all the goals that have been articulated in that document. And I feel we've adequately consulted the First Nations in more than satisfactorily, and I'm happy with the response that they've provided. I think we've done a really good job of consultation. Thank you to Barb Adams and the work that was done there. And I found the letters and responses from the public to resonate with the value that this piece of artwork will offer in that place. And to the point, finally, people's concerns about putting a piece of public art in this place at the park. I generally would agree that we don't need to be littering, that's a word that was used by somebody, our natural spaces with public art. But I don't think we should be littering, but we should be very selective if we are going to put public art on a natural piece of our parkland. And in this case, the piece of artwork is is a story, and it offers a legend that I think will resonate with the people not only of Oak Bay, but anybody who has an interest in the human connection with the natural world. And the story is one that hits the heart of people and makes them think about our connection in that natural world, and how we want that relationship to be sustained. So I think we all know, I mean, it's been said repeatedly, this is a beautiful piece of artwork, and the story that it represents, I think, is equally, it's beautiful and very fitting for the space. So I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Zelka, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ney, for your excellent words. I concur with everything you say. I've also gone through the Parks Management Plan, and I actually don't see the conflicts that some of the correspondents pointed out. I have appreciated very much the experts that have come forward, who are very familiar with the areas, who have shared their advice, and I appreciate the fact that some of that advice has been taken, and the siting was very sensitively chosen. Any of my concerns around this motion were alleviated with the additions in the motion. I appreciate that we have embedded in the motion the siting details and the engagement with First Nations. Absolutely acknowledges the traditional connections that they have to the lands, and I appreciate the fact that we'll be inviting them to, and that we'll be open to whatever sort of a ceremony if they wish to have that. I would be, I'm very pleased to see that was added, and I'm excited to see what that might turn into. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I do appreciate the comments of my colleagues around the table. I understand where they're coming from. However, I can't support the motion that is before us tonight. My reasons for that are it's really my appreciation for the land itself more than perhaps the value of the artwork. And when I looked at the report from the manager of Park Services, I noticed that, you know, it does point out in the report some of the benefits, but I also take very seriously the comment that opening up more of Cattle Point for visitors would likely spread out pedestrian traffic, which could potentially reduce impacts of concentrated foot traffic on endangered flora areas. It doesn't, however, provide any backstop plan for how we would mitigate if that does not occur and we actually have an increase in foot traffic. I also note in the report that it is a recommendation that at a future committee of the whole meeting, staff would provide comment regarding additional potential financial impacts, including, but not limited to, installation, maintenance, site preparation, and environmental restoration of the proposed site location, and that these unknowns for potential financial impact must be addressed prior to council considering acceptance of the donation. So I think that there are still unknowns to this. I perhaps would have greater comfort if I had some more information on how, if we actually do encounter increased foot traffic in the area, what the recommended mitigation plans would be to ensure that we have all of our bases covered for the protection of the area. So for that reason, I can't support the recommendation as it is proposed, but I do respect the comments of my colleagues around the table.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I think there's anything there I can go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just speaking against the motion. I remain opposed to the motion for many of the same reasons that I've already stated. I'm very heartened to hear off the top that there has been additional consultation with the Songhees Nation. Very heartened to hear that they could potentially be actively involved in the dedication and the placement of the sculpture. So this, I think, addresses in large part my concerns about consultation with First Nations on this. I would ask that council reflect generally on this as moving forward in the spirit of active reconciliation. This type of consultation and this type of inclusion is really the minimum that we should expect. So I am pleased that we have gotten to the point that we are at, but I am disappointed that this type of consultations happened essentially so late in the day, arriving so late in the day, and preventing us from moving forward in an active reconciliation capacity. And if that's an uncomfortable conversation to have, it's supposed to be an uncomfortable conversation to have. So this is not merely a consultation element with First Nations, this is an active reconciliation piece. So I don't mean to speak again for the First Nation. I am pleased that they are satisfied with being reached out to in the way that they have. But I think we as a council need to reflect on that process for the next time this comes up. Secondly, I am not satisfied with the measures taken to address the potential ecological impact here. I don't mean to minimize or dismiss the expertise of the people that have evaluated this. I believe that they're doing so with great expertise and with great knowledge. I fear that much along the lines of Councillor Patterson's comments, that the sheer scope and scale and the impact of what might be coming has not been factored into this decision. And to put not too fine a point on it, the district is on the hook for that additional impact to that natural area. And thirdly and lastly, I will point out once again that as it was, council will recall that we have had a recent discussion about debating the relative merits of a piece of public art and whether or not we should be receiving it and the placement thereof. That was a large, detailed, and fractious discussion that ultimately ended up in not receiving a piece of public art. I would remind council that we're proceeding forward without a policy or a guideline on the placement or receipt of large donations like this. So essentially it is now falling to council to adjudicate on a case-by-case basis the relative merits of an individual piece of art and where it's appropriate for those things to go. And I recognize that Public Arts Advisory Committee has weighed in on this, but ultimately it comes up to council as far as decisions on placement on public land. So these are not topics that will evaporate irrespective of the decision that gets taken here. We may very well be approached 6 months from now with another piece of public art, and we will have to make the same decision process again.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I think your points are all well taken, as are everybody's that has spoken today. I'll add my 2 cents on this one. I thoroughly understand. I think the visceral reaction that we all have to Cattle Point and the natural spaces that are there, it definitely takes a special situation for us to consider putting anything in that. And I do feel this is a very special piece as laid out. I would like to just provide some solace in that if we ask for the donation, part of the donation is required under our pieces to provide for maintenance and installation of that piece as well. So there isn't that piece. However, the cost will be borne somewhat by volunteers, but also by the district, no doubt, of cleaning up the invasive species in that area to allow it to happen. I really do appreciate the efforts of the Songhees leadership recently on this to really with the artist to find a path forward and bring us. And I think Councillor Appleton, you raised an incredibly good point. I'm hoping that this process, if it passes, will be a stepping off point for us so we have a bit more open discussion going forward. It's hard sometimes the first time you do anything for people to kind of feel out who's the person to talk to and where it goes. And it feels like now that it's a bit more solid, that there's more people at the table now who have something solid to talk to, and that's made it a little easier. But your point is very well made that this should be an active reconciliation, all these processes that we can bring forward. And I also want to just thoroughly agree with the point about the fact that we do have to come up with a better process for receiving pieces of public art. I think right now doing it ad hoc, in this case we're just even cart before the horse looking at a site to ask for donation of public art, but regardless, that is it's an important piece here. I think that we do look at that going forward because it's an important important things. But I just want to reiterate my stance that this one, I think the site is a spectacular site we have to be stewards of, but the art is also spectacular and I think suitable in this case. I have Councillor Green and then Braithwaite.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments by Councillor Appleton as well. In fact, I hope that this piece of artwork and its location will inspire a more robust reconciliation process. We have not been robust in our reconciliation activities with First Nations and Indigenous communities, and it's very difficult for us because in some ways we don't have an adjacent neighbor. Communities like Esquimalt, Vic West, Victoria have closer physical relationships and have more access. But I totally agree that we need to do more on reconciliation. I look forward to this piece of art in and of itself because of what it is. It might inspire us to build that stronger and closer relationship and have more to do with one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. Again, everyone's comments have been really thoughtful, and I really appreciate that. Everything I wanted to say has basically been said, but I will just reiterate that I look at this as an opportunity to raise awareness of First Nations and of Cattle Point and of the importance of both to Oak Bay. And I also look at it as a really good opportunity to move forward on ensuring that we have a better protection of those invasive species at Cattle Point, because I think for the time and energy and the work that we're going to be putting into that area, that will move that up on our schedule, something that perhaps we weren't going to do for another year or something like that. We'll be going in and we'll be trying to protect those vernal pools and those endangered species a little bit sooner than perhaps we were before. So I'm going to be supporting the motion.
I don't see any other hands, so I'm ready to call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Appleton and Councillor Appleton and Patterson, get the names right, opposed. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for all the thoughtful comments on that. I think I always appreciate listening to people's words around this table. Item number 6 on the agenda, we have a development permit 32 at 2140 Cadbury Bay Road. Do we have staff speaking to this at all, or are we just essentially dealing with them as procedural pieces? Ms. Morden?
Your Worship, I believe Mr. Anderson is on the line, but I can't quite tell because I can only see phone numbers.
Okay, fair enough. Why don't we'll just move forward. If there's a question for Mr. Anderson, I will take those, but these are all referrals from Committee of the Whole where there's been a fulsome discussion. So go ahead, Councillor Green.
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? This is the replacement of balconies in an apartment building on Cadbury Bay Road. Not seeing any, I will then call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Item number 7, upland setting and design 124 at 3535 Upper Terrace Road for some modifications and a new outbuilding. Are there any, I'll maybe get a motion on the table and we can have a discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Zelka?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure whether staff will be able to answer this or not. I noticed that there's a public lane right beside the property, and that the fence is expected to be moved right to the property line. Is that public lane currently accessible, or will it be in any way impacted, please?
Thank you, Councillor Zulka. I don't know the answer to that question, so I'm going to look to see if Mr. Anderson or a member of our Building and Planning Department is able to answer the question. I'm going to pull up the plans while we're...
And I do apologize to staff. I did not alert them to my question ahead of time.
I appreciate that we try. We can't always accommodate the questions sometimes arise at this table. That's fine. And my iPad is thinking.
Sorry, Your Worship. I
Ms.
believe Mr. Anderson is on the line. We're just having some technical difficulties connecting him. So I might have him come through by way of telephone, but we'll sort it out here.
So you're talking about the existing fence to remain on the south side, and then farther back, the fence will move over to
That's
align with the
correct.
fencing at the edge of the property. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
And your question is just whether or not there's currently an open path for public to get through at that point?
Yeah, and just curiosity as to whether the public lane either will be cleared or in any way negatively impacted. That's all.
Is there a public lane there, or is it just the?
It's referred to as a right of way. I guess my term would be line. Unfortunately, I did not have a chance to make it to the property, so that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, no. Questions are always welcome. I'm just making sure we get a clear question for staff. Is Mr. Anderson able to come in?
Sorry, Your Worship. Sorry, technical difficulties, but he has sent me a message to say not cleared and not negatively impacted.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Item number 8 on the agenda, the Departmental Budget Transfer Policy. I believe Mr. Payne is on the line as well. If there's any further questions, again, discuss the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation here to adopt the policy. Are there any questions of Mr. Payne or additional comments? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Payne. I would like to have more understanding of how this proposed budget transfer policy is to be read in conjunction with the sustainable procurement policy that Council approved back in June. Under the sustainable procurement policy, number 2.6, and this is something we agreed to with our last auditor, that the sustainable procurement policy was adopted, and it was what we would be following and what would give council guidance. So under 2.6, it obligates the Director of Financial Services to review and regularly report to the Committee of the Whole a list for all purchases and awards over $25,000. And in 10.5, that contract amendments for amounts greater than $50,000 will be reported to Council for consideration of approval. So since we do already have the sustainable procurement policy, somehow the budget transfer policy, to my interpretation, and that's what I'm seeking clarification on, is the budget transfer policy seems to somehow diminish council's role in evaluating this as it comes forward, and it's not clear that it is actually supportive of the sustainable procurement policy.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Payne, I'm hoping that you're on the line and heard that. Is Mr. Payne available?
I believe he just joined. He's okay. Yeah, I believe he's here now.
Mr. Payne, are you there? Mr. Payne, if you're talking, you may be on mute. We cannot hear you. Okay, we will endeavor to find the... We don't intentionally mute all of our staff, honestly. It's just a side effect of our technology at the moment. I'm quite happy we can move on to other items and circle back to this one if we want to work on that technical aspect. Ms. Morden, is there light at the end of the tunnel?
I believe there is light at the end of the tunnel here. Hold on. Just one moment. I'm just going to step out for one moment.
Ms. Morden, is it okay to move on, or should we just wait for... It's true. I'd have to move on for 2. Okay, I'm going to skip 8 and 9, which are both related to financial policies, and move on to new business and verbal reports. Is there any new business at this table? Not seeing any. Just a report on the Capital Regional District. I just let you know that the service planning has been done for all the committees. So those are rolling up into the committee, a special committee of the whole this week to look at the overall provisional budget for 2021. One item of interest, I think, is just made aware the costing for the sewer treatment is migrating from the current services model over to a capital model. So it'll actually be going from the water bill onto taxation. So it'll actually be happening in large part. We've had this debate at times at this table in past years about where that should sit, but a significant portion of that will be actually ending up on the tax roll, just by the nature of the way that they're allocating those costs. I don't have the exact numbers yet, but that's just, I think I thought would be a point of interest for people. And also wanted to let you know that last week, the Cap Regional Hospital District Board approved the funding for the community consultation for Oak Bay Lodge lands. So that consultant has been hired and has begun its discussions last week with immediately with the Cap Regional Hospital District staff, and we're encouraging them to work closely with our staff and Oak Bay as they go through that process. I'm just happy to take any other verbal reports as well from other committees that people are working on. I'm not seeing a lot of reports. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to update Council, October 22nd was the CRD's Inter-Municipal Climate Action Task Force meeting, which does not meet very regularly and hasn't met actually since the very early part of this year. COVID being a big part of the reason that didn't happen. So this, as Council will recall, is the CRD municipalities send a representative from each one of their councils to sort of sit on the elected representative board, speaking to climate actions to being taken by CRD. There's also a staff working group, as Council will recall. Basically, because the group hasn't met in some time, it was really very much entrained in updates from both staff's perspective and also from the elected officials' perspective. It's actually had been such a long time that I was able to update the group on council approving the recommendations from our Community Climate Action Work Group, which generated a lot of support and a lot of interested discussions. So several of our colleagues around the CRD have demonstrated interest in getting an update on that and the details thereof. So lots of excitement there. And also updates from staff, most significantly, I guess, of which, and I don't mean to put staff on the spot here, because I expect that at some point in the future we will be seeing a report on the CRD sea level rise study, which is council will have recalled that it got circulated around, I think, to all councils some time ago, and it is a very deep, arcane, and complicated piece of reporting to get into. But it does hold some really interesting material for Oak Bay in it. Not the least of which being that our flood construction levels our proposed flood construction levels, assuming certain levels of sea level rise, are the largest in the region in a lot of cases. So that would have potential long-term implications for adapting to climate change and sea level rise. But I will defer to staff's upcoming update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Ney.
Yeah, I was just going to make council aware of on November 6th, there's a Zoom meeting where the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Climate Leadership Plan, which I've been a part of as a researcher, not as a politician, but it does involve local government representatives who are appointed on this committee to build a climate action resilience plan for Vancouver Island and coastal communities. And we've developed a report through our research team at the university that will be used to facilitate discussions throughout the day, hopefully to have some real input to begin to build the Vancouver Island Climate Action Plan. The whole purpose of this really is to integrate knowledge and to work towards accelerating a climate action plan implementation and innovations on the island. So it's open to all. If you have a chance, you can zip in at different times or participate for the day. It'll be very useful to have anybody's input who's available and interested.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Don't see any other updates are on the table, so we'll move on. I'm going to move back to item number 8 if we still do not have Mr. Payne available. Okay, feeling the pain here of technology. We have next up then, Councillor Ney. I hope you're ready. A notice of motion, and I think I got just an email pop up here as I was doing this that there's some potential changes to the wording.
So what we having considered the motion, there's one part that we'd like to have amended, and so I'll take direction from you, Mr. Mayor. Do you want the first motion read out and then make an amendment to that, or?
I don't think we need it read out in the sense that we have we have it here in front of us. This is the phasing out by 2024, the staff report to on phasing out 2024, the use of internal works and a moratorium on the use of leaf blowers unless they're indispensable. That's the way it's worded right now. So if you want to make an amendment, we should probably, if you want to make that motion, we can second it, then we can take amendments to that.
So I'll move that.
Moved and seconded, thank you. That's now live on the table, but Councillor Ney, as the mover, you're more than welcome to motivate and or amend.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is make an amendment to the motion, and the amendment starts. You've got it in your email boxes if you're able to access it. But on the second part of the motion, to amend that to issuing a residential ban on all gas-powered garden tools, including leaf blowers, lawn mowers, edge trimmers, chainsaws, and small engine-driven equipment by January 2022. And this is about asking for a staff report to provide educative support that would make a recommendation providing educative support and old gas-powered equipment rebates as per recommendation 3 of the Climate Action Committee, March 9th, 2020. So, so I'm happy to speak to it. Oh, it needs a second, I guess, Mr.
So
Mayor.
just so we're all clear on what, so the first portion is left intact, the second motion is changed
Correct.
considerably, and the third motion is adding.
Added. Correct.
Just want to give, I'm just trying to procedurally here, if it's my duty is to decide if it's close enough to the original to accept the amendment, or if we should just make a new motion on this one. I think it's essentially, it's just 2 and 3 are quite different from the original piece. So can we maybe, we'll see if there's a seconder for the amendment on this. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just procedurally, if there is no seconder for the amendment, then Councillor Ney would be free to withdraw the original motion and present the entire motion in its entirety. Would that be the mechanism that's being presented here?
No, generally speaking, if the motion is, there's a motion on the floor which has been seconded, and then the amendment would change it to this new motion. If this fails, it would go back to the original motion, and we would debate the original motion.
Well, for the purposes of discussion, then I'll second the amendment.
Okay, so it's now live on the floor. Councillor Ney, we're going to need your help to motivate the explanation of the changes as we have a, go ahead.
Yeah, so just let me pull this up. So the idea here is to work towards facilitating the transition from gas-powered garden tools. In particular, the focus is leaf blowers, but there are many other garden tools that are gas-powered. And we talked about this previously at the committee, that there's a whole array of problematic harms, not to mention the GHGs. The noise is particularly an issue. And the issue of biodiversity as well as particulates in the air. So the first part speaks to a staff report that helps us, that the first part speaks to the phasing in by the corporation of gas-powered tools, to transition from gas-powered tools to electric. And the second part is focused specifically on a residential ban of all gas-powered tools by January 2022. And the idea, and the third part really is asking for educational support and rebate support to support the ban, the transition to move from gas-powered to electric-powered garden tools by 2022. So the change came about because, having talked with numerous residents, some staff, and business owners, is that there's a readiness to move from gas-powered to technology, especially in Oak Bay because of the noise. The technology is available. And the businesses aren't concerned. The concern for the businesses right now is the competition issue. So because it's competitive, there's a leaning towards gas-powered, high-powered, gas-powered leaf blowers, because they are marginally quicker than the electric ones. But more importantly, the electric ones still require a battery or two. But the business people that I've spoken to who are doing this say that the issue of competition will be overcome by regulating, so that everybody's working from the same playing field. So if everybody has to transition over to electric, then the cost will be the same for all business owners, which will then be passed on to the consumer. And so the business, it doesn't become an onerous business issue, or that somebody would be squeezed out because they couldn't do it. The money could be recouped by extra charges to residents. So that's the logic that's been shared with me. And so that's the motion. And it is somewhat fast. It's like transitioning to a year. But communities have done this. And I think that, and if people are talking around, you'll find there's a real readiness of people to uptake this technology and address the real obnoxious noise that occurs for people, particularly during this pandemic time, when people are more confined to their homes and trying to work out of their homes, and being really bothered by the frequency noise of these two-stroke engines.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Appleton, you'd seconded. If you want to speak to it, I'll let you do that. You don't have to, though, at this point.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just be very brief. I think what is implicit here in the motion is, again, this is a report from staff evaluating how such a thing would be brought about. And I think that it's understood that if what is presented here were to be explored, there's obviously a number of questions that would need to get answered, not the least of which is if there was going to be an outright ban on machinery, how such a thing would be enforced and what that would look like, and how the community would react to that. So I think what is on the table right now is worthwhile from the perspective of having a staff report and having some options put before council on how that might be enacted.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Green, and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you. And just two questions through you to Councillor Ney. Councillor Ney, you mentioned 2022, but in the resolution it says 2024. Is that?
No, the 2024 is for the corporation. The 2022, unless I've written it down wrong, did I? No.
Okay.
It's 2022 for the residential ban.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. And as Councillor Appleton points out, this motion does involve a staff report and staff exploration of the issue. But just an idea, I don't understand how we would define indispensable. So if that can be If that can be well defined in the staff report, that would be appreciated.
That's been
because
struck off at this point.
oh,
if-
has it? So I'm working from.
The old,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Okay.
there's a new motion. It's in your inbox, but you obviously haven't got that right now, so, yeah.
Sorry, I was working off the website. Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
so this is, so not being able to share
Yeah.
the amendment is a bit problematic here. I think either we have to circulate a written copy of it so people can have it, get it up on the screens, or we can just table this to the next meeting and deal with it there as well as the other option. I think given us asking for a staff information report back, it's probably not, but I think council needs to have a clear understanding of what the current motion actually is.
I apologize, Your Worship. Councillor Ney had contacted me prior to the meeting, and I had directed her the discussion on the floor was appropriate. A general request for clarification is great, but I'm sorry if I misled you,
okay,
Councillor
yeah.
Ney.
So I consider this to be I consider it an amendment because I think it's within the original spirit of the motion and it contains a significant portion of that original motion. But I'm having a problem here debating when people can't actually see the exact
Okay.
wording.
So I could text it to you, Councillor. Have you got your phone?
Why don't I think better if we just
Yeah?
table it
Okay.
if that's amenable to the thing. I think it'd be appropriate here just to table it to the next council meeting and we'll just consider it that one. It's not. This would be tabling the amendment motion.
Okay.
I just don't think we can have a debate on it without all of council being able to see the wording.
Okay.
Your Worship, could we just have a motion to refer then?
Sure. So we're refer to November.
Sorry. Special meeting on November 2nd or next regular council meeting is November 9th.
How about do we have to give a date, or do we or can we just say to?
You just
to
say the
a
next
future,
regular council meeting, yeah, sure.
Okay, a future council meeting that can be one of those
Sure.
two. Okay, is that amenable? I just want to reach out to the mover of the amendment, Councillor Ney. Is that okay? So be a motion to refer to a future council meeting.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
And sorry, Councillor Braithwaite, you had a question on that?
I mean, yes, I mean, I'm glad it's being referred because I think this really, really changes the motion. So I'll be glad to see it come back in a written form. But to me, it changes it just changes it in a way that it takes it out of the municipal realm and puts it into the residential realm, which I don't think was the intent of the original motion. So it'll be interesting to see how it's going to come back in the exact wording that it's going to come back in.
Okay, thank you. I think we really, at this point now, the motion is to refer. We just need to speak to the motion to refer. Well, sort of vaguely included, but we'll just leave it at that. Any other discussion on the referral? Councillor Selka?
Point of procedure in general. If there's a major wording change like this, it would be great if staff or someone could help by printing it out ahead of time. Unfortunately, it's not in my mailbox, so I'm at a loss to understand what this is about. Thank you.
All right, that's fine. I think we'll always try to endeavor on these things to provide written or copies ahead of time if there's changes. So this referral will allow us the time to kind of have it in writing for all of us to look at the next meeting. So any other discussion on the referral motion? No, seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Now going back to item number 8, as I've got a notification that Mr. Payne is back. And this would be on the budget transfer policy. Mr. Payne, are you there? I'm just going to confirm this before we move on.
Yes, Your Worship, I am.
Okay, we can't hear you very clearly at this point, so we're just letting staff address the microphone and volume. Can you try that again, Mr. Payne? Just let us know that you're there.
Okay, how do I sound now?
You sound fantastic, almost like you're in the room with us. So you missed the entirety, I believe, of Councillor Patterson's original question. So perhaps I can give a concise version of that question to Mr. Payne, Councillor Patterson, and see if he has an answer.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, Mr. Payne, so that you have it, is that in considering the policy that is before us, I was going back and looking at the sustainable procurement policy that Council adopted in June. The two policies seem to overlap in many ways, but in the sustainable procurement policy, and this was the one that we committed to our auditor that we would be using to guide us as a council for the year going forward. So under 2.6, it says monitoring and report obligates the Director of Financial Services to review and regularly report to the Committee of the Whole a list for all purchases and awards over $25,000. And under 10.5, it says contract amendments for amounts greater than $50,000 will be reported to Council for consideration of approval. Now, the policy that is before us now, as I read it, and perhaps I'm not clear on that and you can shed more light on it, but it seems to, in fact, have potential for reducing the transparency and oversight that is inherent in the sustainable procurement policy.
Mr. Payne, do you get the question?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And as Councillor Patterson has correctly pointed out, the policies are meant to work well together. In fact, they do refer to each other. The sustainable procurement policy, however, is really to guide the actual purchasing of goods and services, and doesn't really relate to how Council provides overall budget authority for those purchases. The purchasing policy ensures that we're in compliance with case law and trade agreements with respect to how we ensure that there is competition for the purchasing of items, whereas the budget policy provides insight to the public in terms of Council providing authority to expend funds. So in the one case, Council could provide overall budget envelope approval authority, but how we go about actually spending those funds are subject to trade agreements and case law. So Councillor Patterson, for instance, referred to Section 2.6 of the procurement policy, which is there for transparency purposes, and Council will see the first instance of that in the Q3 budget report on the November 2nd agenda, which will show Council all of the contracts that have been executed with a value of over $25,000 and purchases that have in fact occurred over $25,000.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Patterson, did that sufficiently answer your question?
I think it does. I mean, it's difficult because I certainly accept what the Director of Finances is saying. You know, not having seen it will be a forthcoming report, so I don't have anything to judge it by. So I will take it under his advice that it will be forthcoming. And it will be my expectation then that there will be greater clarity in how these two policies hang together, particularly since we have committed to the sustainable procurement under the advice of the auditor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I certainly appreciate this part of this discussion that happened at the Committee of the Whole, which led to the second part of this, which is to review it again in a year's time when we consider that report in Q3 of 2021. I think that's our chance to really look at this and how it works in the real world. And is there any other questions of Mr. Payne? Or go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm generally in favor of the policy going forward, and I don't really see a huge conflict with the sustainable procurement policies. And I appreciate the comments of the Director of Finance. I do have a general concern with respect to transparency and just making sure that this body is always aware of what's happening sort of behind the scenes with respect to the budget. So I do look forward to, with respect to for the committees and commissions reports as they come forward. I understand we still have an outstanding notice of motion with respect to a potential, for lack of a better word, an audit committee. Financial Governance and Oversight Committee. There's been an outstanding request for something like that to be stood up. And I would that would give me a much deeper sense of a calm and ease with these sort of policies moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I just might turn to Ms. Rella since the topic was raised. If you have any update on that council direction from way back when,
Thank you, Your
pre-COVID.
Worship. That was actually included as part of the 18 recommendations that council provided with regards to commission and committee review. A notice of motion was discussed, but because there was already council direction on the book, the notice of motion didn't land on the floor. The matter has been discussed and it is prioritized in staff's work plan, and the Director of Finance is anticipating a report on that finance committee or council's direction to provide such at a future meeting. So council will provide direction to staff accordingly, and we're hoping to present that prior to the end of the year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We need a motion. I believe it's not yet been made. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
I'll make the staff recommendation motion.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
seconder? Second. Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing any? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And item number 9, travel and expense reimbursement policy. Again, discussed at length at the committee of the whole, but this is another opportunity for us to ask more questions or provide comments. I'll probably take questions first, and then we'll take a motion and take comments on the motion. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And kind of you get onto one thing and it takes you to many of these that are on the agenda, which was somewhat convenient. But again, going back to the 2019 audit, there was a comment, this policy, and I certainly credit Mr. Payne for bringing forward all of these policies that were recommended in the audit report. So thank you for that. But in the audit report, when it talks about the staff travel guidelines and the expenses, it does indicate a directive there under Section 410 that other municipalities have determined the CAO approved the mayor's expenditures and that council members approved the CAO expenses. I am taking that to perhaps mean that there wouldn't be reciprocal approval of expenses between the mayor and CAO, but I do keep in mind that other municipalities do have finance committees that can pick up that role. I'm wondering if perhaps our Director of Finances or our CAO could speak to the directive that was in the auditor's report versus what is here.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'll take that to Mr. Payne, who would have more detailed knowledge of the specifics of the auditor's report and of the report in front of us. Mr. Payne?
Yes, Your Worship, and Councillor Patterson is correct that the auditors they wanted to recommend for practical reasons that those who are having their expenses approved are having them approved by someone where there's not an employment conflict. So essentially, if I were to approve the expenses of the CAO, well, there's certainly a conflict there, being that Ms. Varela is my employer. Now, in terms of having council or the mayor in this case approve the CAO's expenses, in the eyes of the auditor, that is vested in the mayor. So so council's authority to approve the CAO's expenses is vested in the mayor pursuant to the policy. So that's the assumption, and it's been the draft has been reviewed by our auditors, and they believe that it does meet that requirement. However, it wouldn't be inappropriate for council itself through as vested in a committee either approving such expenses. So both structures work in terms of satisfying the auditor's assurance.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Payne? If not, I'll take a motion and we can get to more questions or comments.
I'll move that council repeal the staff travel guidelines, conferences, seminars, and courses policy 2006 and adopt travel and expenses reimbursement policy.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any other discussion? I'm not seeing any, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Payne, for being ready at hand with answers and for your work on these policies. I really appreciate that we keep making improvements to our financial reporting and policies. And I know it's a long way to go, but it's nice to see us on a forward journey at that. We have up next item number 12, Streets and Traffic Amendment Bylaw 4100, Amendment Bylaw 4767, and we have Mr. Haran here to give a quick overview and answer any questions that we might have. Mr. Haran, welcome to our meeting. And thank you for being here in person.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you. The introduction is very straightforward and short. We're just making a recommendation to make some minor adjustments to the Streets and Traffic Bylaw to allow for some tools for enforcement for Bylaw and Oak Bay Police to make some changes around sleeping in vehicles overnight. The report reflects the background and the recommendations, and happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Ney.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, Mr. Horan, so how extensive do you estimate that this issue is?
Mr. Haran, are you able to answer that question?
It's probably best to refer the question to Chief Constable Bernardis, who I believe is on the line. So I will stop and pause for a second to see if that's true.
I am on the line, Your Worship.
All right.
Can you hear me, Your Worship?
We can, Chief Bernardis. Did you hear the question? Just about some general sense of the frequency of the problem at this point?
Yes, I heard the question from Councillor Ney. Thank you, Councillor Ney. We're getting regular complaints about various people parking. Sometimes when we check them, it's not really problematic, but we've had complaints of one person refusing to ever move to a different street. Despite respectful requests from the neighbors, he persists in staying in front of one specific house. And he's been asked several times to just even try a different street every once in a while and refuses. We've had another male who is using a park beside where he parks overnight as a washroom. And we've had several complaints recently in the Willows Beach area. And so the more we enforce in the beach area, we're concerned about it just moving out onto the street. And I wanted to just be clear while I have this opportunity to speak that there would be no intent by the Oak Bay Police to rigorously enforce this bylaw and try to seek funds. Really, it would be a tool to be used at our discretion and when appropriate to deal with people who are sometimes camping on our streets because they don't have to pay for a provincial park, but they're just traveling around BC and they want to be near Willows Beach. And other people, it might just be in the example, using the gentleman that wouldn't switch streets, we would be able to say to him, listen, we understand you're currently living in your car. While we try to help him find supportive housing, we would be able to then say, listen, you've got to move to another street tonight. To give those specific residents a break who probably never bargained for having a car with a resident in it out front of their house every single night for a couple years. So right now we have no ability to do any enforcement action, and this would just give us a tool. But again, we wouldn't be, in the vast majority of cases, even when we did take any action, it wouldn't be to write a ticket. It would simply be to be able to use it as a mechanism to move someone along where appropriate.
Thank you, Chief Bernardis. Councillor Ney, anything else?
That was it. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you very much. And through you, Mayor, the proposed fine is really only comparable with camping fees, is it not?
Mr. Haran, how are the fines set on bylaws like this?
Well, at this time, it's one step at a time. So the first thing is putting in place the guidance, which is the tool around what the rules are. But the review of what the fines would be is a bigger task, because it's not just this particular part of the bylaw that would have to be looked at. It would be all of the fines in general, which is something that certainly could be looked at, but as a broader task for next year, more of a bigger issue to look at a future time.
Thank you, Mr. Haran. Any other questions, Councillor Zelka? Sorry, I actually have Appleton and Zelka. My apologies. I have a list and I'm not following it. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff. I think I know the answer to this, but if this went forward, this would not fetter council's future ability to suspend the application of this bylaw for a particular geographic area or for a particular time frame. Like I'm referring to the current suspension, which I believe is still in force, of bylaw enforcement for parking of things like trailers and RVs in people's driveways. We suspended the enforcement of that bylaw to allow for a response to COVID. I'm just wondering whether I would assume that nothing here prevents us from issuing a similar temporary suspension for whatever reason council thought appropriate.
Mr. Haran, are you comfortable answering that, or maybe I should even go to Ms. Morden on that one, because I think that comes
Quickly, Your Worship, if you like.
Mr. Chief Bernodes, I think it's probably appropriate just for Ms. Morden to answer the question about procedurally how we would suspend that if we wish to do so.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So, through you, Your Worship, that nothing in the proposed amendment presented here prevents council from issuing in the future temporary suspension of the bylaw, or basically directing that enforcement of the bylaw be temporarily suspended either in a particular geographic area or for a particular time frame.
I'm just getting looks back and forth. Ms. Rella, did you wish to answer that question?
I'll take that, Your Worship, because Ms. Morden didn't have the benefit of being here when council suspended the bylaw to allow for self-isolation in people's driveways. So if there was, again, a COVID response that was required, if that was the concern, council can always come back in with an exceptional circumstance and direct enforcement. I believe Chief Bernodes also was having a thought there, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll go to you, Chief Bernodes.
Yes, I was just going to say, in lieu of any formal exemptions, if council was to request that the Oak Bay Police not enforce for reasons of, say, COVID or something like that, we would be very receptive to that type of instruction. This isn't a bylaw that, we're keen to enforce. I just want to be clear about that. It's just a tool.
Thank you. And then I have Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general comment to say I'm appreciating the level of compassion that's being expressed by staff with respect to this situation as it presents. And while I understand why we need these tools in place, I appreciate that when at the interface with the public, I appreciate staff being very compassionate in the application of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. It's appropriate here, I think, to have, if we're going to get to comments, to do first and second reading and then contain any additional comments within that, if that's amenable. Someone would like to make, can we do first and second reading together, Ms. Morden? Is that acceptable in this case?
Yes,
I'll
yes,
move-
acceptable,
Okay.
Your Worship.
I'll move first and second reading of the Streets and Traffic Amendment Bylaw number 4100, 2000, Amendment Bylaw number 4767, 2020.
Second.
So first and second reading is now moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from this body on that? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I very much appreciate Councillor Zelka's comments. I really and very much appreciate the comments from the Chief of Police. We recognize that these are definitely tools that the community needs, but I would hope and I feel that Council as a whole also recognizes that there are times where people, through no fault of their own, end up sleeping in their cars, and this is. I appreciate the lens that this bylaw is being evaluated in, so that it does not other people who do not have access to housing.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you. And I would just like to add to those comments, and I agree wholeheartedly with my two previous council colleagues. And I think really the issue here is public health and safety from 2 points of view. For the individual sleeping on the street, which is not always the most secure or safest thing to do, and for residents who don't feel safe in their homes at times for whatever the reason. So I think as long as we keep it within the focus of public health and safety and well-being, I think we're doing the right thing and taking the right approach. And I also appreciate that the police in particular have been very compassionate in past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. I will then call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, not opposed, and then move third reading.
I'll move third reading of that same bylaw.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I don't usually debate, but I'll take comments if any are out there. Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed, not opposed. That'll come back for adoption at the next council meeting. And item number 13 on the agenda is our corporate records management bylaw. Ms. Morden, do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this bylaw,
Actually, I don't know if we need it. We just realized it's for adoption, so we've already done first, second, and
Correct.
third reading.
Yeah.
We don't normally debate on adoption, although we are absolutely welcome to do so. But I would take a motion to adopt, and then we can speak to that.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the adoption of this? Councillor Patterson?
Just, and thank you, Mayor. I, as I spoke last time about the records management, I am very happy to see that this came forward, and so, I'm very supportive of that. The only comment I have, and perhaps this is something that we could keep in mind for perhaps amending the policy at a later date, but the policy does not specifically address classification and oversight of archival records, and there are a large number of members of the public that the archival records are something that they access on a regular basis, they work with, and so, I have been assuring people that this policy that we're bringing in has absolutely no intent of in any way changing the access to the archival records, but perhaps that's something that Ms. Morden could just give us a few comments on.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. If it's of interest to the public, it's always worth just asking the question here so that the public can hear an answer. Ms. Morden?
yes, thank you for the question. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Patterson. The LGMA classification system that we're basing the model on for Oak Bay actually does encompass archives. We're working very closely with Ms. Sander on how we're structuring the classification for that particular section. And she's also involved in our vault inventory initiative that's going on right now. So we're getting lots of great input. Anytime that we identify records that, according to the new retention system, could possibly be moved to a destruction phase, we are consulting with her as well. So just making sure there's that perspective there too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. And thank you for the answer, Ms. Morden. Any other comments or? Not seeing any. We have a motion to adopt in front of us. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. And last item on the agenda, someone I'm sure will move this.
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much, everyone, as always, for thoughtful debate, and look forward to seeing you, I guess, the week after. Oh, next week. We're doing November 2nd.